Hello and welcome again to What If Natives Won, a video blogging channel about alternate history in American Indians, Native Americans, Indigenous peoples. This is the last video in this series, but there will be others. Look for Latin American victory, African victory, and Asian Pacific Islander victory. My name is Al Carroll. I'm Associate Professor of History at Northern Virginia Community College. I've written mostly about wars, veterans, human rights, and genocide. I'm also, together with Rob Schmidt of Bluecorn Comics, editing and putting out a short story collection, What If Natives Won. This is what this video blog and channel are about. There's a huge lack of alternate history written about American Indians, indigenous people. I've had great success using alternate history to teach my students, show them that absolutely nothing in history was inevitable. It never had to be. The worst of human history is always a conscious choice. Change even one, and you have an entirely different history, different present, different society. When could the first native U.S. president have been possible? What could they have done to change things, make America more equal, less racist, better for natives, and better for all people? These are all the possibilities, some with only a very small chance, others with a much better likelihood than most people know. Chief John Ross, president of the Cherokee Nation during the Trail of Tears, is the first long shot with any chance to be U.S. president. A Choctaw chief actually ran for Congress but got little support. It's important to remember that half of all white Americans opposed the Trail of Tears. Over 1 million whites signed petitions opposing it, and Congress just barely passed it. If Jackson had been defeated and then impeached and removed, as discussed in video 18, John Ross could run to try to rally white supporters. His chances are slim, but would make an important early point of how many anti-racists were in America very early. If all of Mexico could be made part of the U.S., as discussed in video 22, a number of famous figures from Mexican history will now be Americans. The most famous native likely to be U.S. president would be Benito Juarez, who was Zapotec. It is almost certain he will be a U.S. congressman, senator, or governor likely to run for president. He is likely to win most Mexican voters, some black voters in the South, and some northern abolitionists. He is most likely to win during Reconstruction, and Juarez would strive for a successful early civil rights movement for blacks as well as Mexicans and natives. Emiliano Zapata, the Mexican Revolution leader in Morelos, was Nahua ancestry. He also has enough possible followers to make a serious effort to become the first native U.S. president. He is of the right age to take part in any Spanish-American War as enlisted, or World War I as an officer had he chosen a military career. The most likely time for any run for president would be in opposition to the racist hysteria of the 1920s and rise of the KKK, or during the Great Depression and deep poverty, when his populist indigenous message would have great appeal. Turning back to natives without any need for another point of departure involving Mexico, Charles David Carter was a Chickasaw and Democratic congressman from 1907 to 1927. He is not well known other than being one of the first native congressmen. His rise would only be should he be chosen as a vice president, and the president dies. Next, Robert Latham Owen was a Cherokee and a Republican senator. He was born wealthy, and his family lost their fortune. He turned to being a teacher on the reservation, then the secretary on their Board of Education, a reservation agent, a community banker, and a lawyer for the 5 tribes of Oklahoma. He also organized for the proposed state of Sequoia, a failed attempt to split off native communities from the proposed state of Oklahoma. As an Oklahoma senator, Owen was a leading progressive. He was the creator of the Federal Reserve, campaigned for William Jennings Bryan in 1908, and proposed FDIC the same year. He favored direct election of senators, anti-child labor laws, the Health and Education and Welfare Department, and the League of Nations. He ran for president in 1920. He was almost the vice president nominee instead of Franklin Roosevelt, the second closest to becoming president on this list. Had he become vice president and then president, he would continue as an early progressive, perhaps pushing for reforms that might prevent the Great Depression. Next, Charles Curtis was an Osage and Republican senator and later the vice president. He is noted almost solely for one thing, the first draft of the Dawes Act, an attempt to forcibly break up reservations and assimilate natives. Curtis, most of his life, grew up around wealthy whites, except for a short time on the reservation with his grandparents. In 1928, there was an assassination attempt on Herbert Hoover by Argentine anarchists. Had they succeeded, there is likely little Curtis would do differently. The same conservative economics that both caused and lengthened the Great Depression and led to Franklin Roosevelt's election and the New Deal. The next is Ben Rifle, a Lakota and Republican congressman in the 1960s, a conservative and believer in assimilation, though he was definitely anti-segregation and an advocate for Indian education. He was then appointed to the National Endowment of the Humanities as a Nixon supporter. The only way for him is had he been an unlikely vice president choice for Nixon. He would continue much of Nixon's conservative approach, but with none of Nixon's recklessness, corruption, or viciousness. The next is Willie Hensley, an Inuit and a Democratic congressman who ran for lieutenant governor in Alaska in 1990. He was defeated due to an ex-governor running for a third party. Had the ex-governor stayed out, Henson could be an unlikely vice president choice in 1992 or 1996. The final one, Ben Nighthorse Campbell, a Cheyenne and a Colorado senator, first as a Democrat and then switching parties to the Republicans. The most likely time for him to run was in 2000. He was a moderate Republican. President is unlikely, but vice president a small possibility. There was a failed assassination attempt versus G.W. Bush in 2005. Had Campbell become president, he is unlikely to go to war with Iraq. He voted for, but based his vote on the false intelligence Dick Cheney pushed. With Campbell as vice president, that is far less certain. I look forward to your comments and questions. I'll answer them as often as I can. Racism, genocide, denial, childish behavior, personal attacks get deleted. But I do recognize that some questions will be asked in ignorance because much of the facts I point to are new to most people. Please repost freely. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. I'll post again in about a month with a new series of alternate histories, Latin American Victory. There are also other alternate history series planned, African Victory and Asian Pacific Islander Victory. This has been What If Natives Won video blog and channel. Thanks for watching and your support.